The Secretary of State sits down with CBN News for a deep dive on the administration's fight for religious freedom around the world.
And he's addressing some of the controversy facing the White House. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. Secretary Pompeo is defending the president after an incendiary tweet many call racist.
Pompeo also says progressive congressional Democrats are, quote, deeply troubling. Today he sat down with CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. And David is here now with us for more.
David, much of the country has been looking for a response from the administration on these tweets. Today you sat down with Secretary Pompeo and asked him about it.
Right. We talked about the squad. We know all about the squad now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all of them. And they've said, at least according to the president and many others, troubling things about America. And so I wanted to ask Secretary Pompeo specifically about that because, after all, he is Secretary of State and he goes around the world promoting America. So what did he think about the squad's recent comments with the president? Have a look. I want to ask you a little bit more broadly about foreign policy. I know Joe Biden has been critical. I know that's politics, but Joe Biden's been critical of this administration's foreign policy. And then we have the squad that we hear so much about. A lot of what the president has said, anti-Israel rhetoric coming from these folks. What do you make of that as Secretary of State and what that message sends to folks around the world, especially Israel and some of our allies?
Look, when a handful of members of Congress say things that are in the tone of the fact that they blame America for so much of the trouble in the world, that's deeply troubling. As I stare at the problem set, whether it's work that we're doing in the Middle East or work we're doing to solve the problem of HIV/AIDS in Africa, or the reconciliation effort that we're underway with in Afghanistan, I watch America, I watch its motives. We are a force for good in the world, not a force for evil. We are not the cause of these conflicts. And I hear these members of Congress talk about this as if America had generated this trouble. And to blame America first for these things is deeply inconsistent with not only our founding and our tradition, but with the facts on the ground.
Of course, all of this started with an original tweet that many considered racist by the president. It's something I asked the Secretary of State about. Have a look. The president trusts you. You have a good relationship with him. He is shockingly under attack, let me think, all the time by the media and his critics, especially this week with some of the tweets that we've heard, and the R word, the racist word is used. So we've talked to him about that. What do you know about him as president that can speak to this issue about what we have heard so far this week about some of the tweets and some of the controversy surrounding this?
So I've worked for the president now for, goodness, almost 2.5 years now. And I've watched the work that we've done, first as CIA director and now as Secretary of State. His guidance to me has been very clear. Our mission is to build out American security. He talks about America first in lots of contexts. My mission, I'm the American Secretary of State, so my mission is to keep the American people safe. And each and every time we've talked about a particularly difficult situation or how to respond to a threat that's imposed on us, it's been about data and facts, coming up with a set of policy options that are achievable. That is, we believe you have to be realistic. You have to take the world as it is. You can't pretend that something else is going to transpire that you know is very unlikely. And we've worked on that. And he's done this in every country. He's done this regardless of the race of the individuals in that country, the religion. It is about delivering these good outcomes. We've built out amazing alliances. We've got the world to work with us on North Korea. We've had 60 countries help us make the lives better for the people of Venezuela. All of those projects that we're engaged in, we do this with other nations, and the president is fully supportive of this.
And so you're saying race has nothing to do with this?
Never seen it. Yeah. Not once.
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly those are the news of the day items, and there was a lot more we discussed throughout the interview.
David, one of those things, Pompeo recently announced the new Commission on Unalienable Rights. Tell us about that.
Right. So there's, according to Secretary Pompeo, which you'll hear in a moment, he talks about there's tons of rights out there. Well, what are American rights? So in other words, what are human rights? And they go back to the founding of this. And so that's what they're trying to figure out. What are human rights? Well, the women's groups and minority groups have pushed back to say, wait a minute, are you trying to roll back some of these human rights that we've heard about before? Secretary Pompeo addressed that. Have a look.
I'm really excited about what we're going to do with this commission. It's been a long time since the State Department has taken a good hard look at the foundations, the rights, where they're grounded, how we think about those things that are essential to every human being. You know this, David. When you start to say that all thousands of things are rights, it diminishes these most fundamental freedoms. It diminishes these essential rights, the right to freedom of worship, the most powerful things that each create our dignity as human beings. And so we're going to go take a good look at that. We're going to ground it in the Founding Fathers' understanding. We're going to ground it in our Constitution. We're going to go back and look at what the last time that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did its work. And we're going to more what we view here as human rights in the United States based on this historic fundamental set of understandings. We think this will improve, has the capacity to improve human rights and the understanding of human rights all around the world.
It's a potential controversy out there depending on how they define those human rights, so we'll watch that.
David, this is not your first time interviewing Pompeo. He talks a lot about his faith, and you've asked him about this in the past. It's something that's extremely important to him. It shapes him, it guides him, and it influences what he champions as a leader.
Right, especially on religious freedom, which of course is the reason for the ministerial this week. And I talked to him specifically about that, and some of his answer was very interesting. Because watch the first part of this answer. I think a lot of folks might have some issues with what he says about his faith and how he sees the Bible. Have a look.
Look, as a Christian, we have these fundamental understandings from the Bible that talk about how you treat other human beings. So whether it's the capacity to practice your faith as a Jew in a country around the world, or your ability to be a faithful practitioner of Islam somewhere in a country that you're a minority, Christians believe that faith right, different from mine, but nonetheless your expression of your faith, fundamentally has a right to be expressed, and we want every country to do that. And so, yes, it's connected with my understanding of the world, and I think one that America has held dear since its founding as well.
When he talked about some of those Christian principles, detention centers came to mind. And I think a lot of people will question him if those are the Christian principles at play. So watch for some potential pushback on that. Finally, the ministerial conference, it'll be going on all this week. It brings all of civic leaders and faith leaders together, and here's how he explained it.
It's an important gathering. It's the second time we've had the opportunity to do this. We bring in leaders from all across the world, religious leaders, civil society leaders, government leaders, all aimed singularly at the focus of increasing the capacity for human beings to have the right to worship in the way they want, the way they choose, in every country in the world. And we know we're blessed here. It's our first freedom enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, but that's not the case everywhere. And our mission set is to highlight its importance, to educate leaders around the world about how important this is, how it can make your country better and stronger if you'll allow people of every faith to practice their faith, or if they choose not to, fine too. And it's a wonderful opportunity. There's small groups that'll gather and talk about particular issues, particular tactics, and then we hope throughout the year, just in this past year, there'll be groups meet all around the world to further this cause.
Full report on the 700 Club Wednesday morning, immigration, refugees, a lot more in the interview. We just don't have enough time here. Unless you want to give me a piece.
Sure.
David, great interview.
Thanks.
Great job.
David.
Thanks.